Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is
Corey. If I'm AI, can I detect I'm AI? Not Griner.
I don't think you can, but
I guess we'll
I don't
find
know.
out.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. On today's episode, we will go over a couple of pretty critical zero-day vulnerabilities and some Cisco appliances. We'll discuss a phishing threat involving compromised or malicious SVG files. And we will end with some updates from GitHub on how they plan to secure the software supply chain. With that, let's go ahead and, publish our way in. So, Corey, let's start today with the first story, though, where just last Thursday, at the time of folks listening to this, Cisco published a couple of emergency patches for their ASA 5500X series models for a series of vulnerabilities that they said were under active exploit. There's three main issues: CVE 2025-20333, which is a authenticated remote code execution in their VPN web server. There's same CVE 20636, which is a remote code execution that's either unauthenticated or authenticated depending on the device model. And then there is a unauthorized access vulnerability that lets an unauthenticated attacker access URL endpoints that it should normally require authentication. Basically, an attacker can chain these three together to completely pwn the device if it's vulnerable. In their advisory, they described this story where starting in May of 2025, they were engaged by multiple government agencies to investigate attacks targeting Cisco ASA 5500X devices that were running VPN services. So think like IKE2 or an SSL VPN exposed to the internet. The attackers in these cases succeeded in implanting malware, executing commands, and exfiltrating data from the compromised devices. And they even succeeded in gaining persistence on them by compromising the ROM on the Cisco devices, meaning even if you rebooted them or did a normal upgrade, we'll get to the remediation in a second, they would still be hanging out inside this device. So they exploited multiple zero-day vulnerabilities to get there. They even had some evasion techniques, like once they gained access, they disabled logging. They intercepted CLI commands to modify the results of them. And they even intentionally crashed devices to prevent further diagnostic analysis. Cisco attributed all this to the same threat actor that was responsible for the Arcane Door campaign targeting Cisco ASA devices back in early 2024, if you remember that one. But at the end of the day, it looks like, so Cisco's got a bunch of 5500X devices of varying degrees of already end of support or on their way to end of support. There's a collection of the older ones that didn't have secure boot enabled. The newer ones all do. Really, it's the ones that didn't have secure boot, basically anything up until the ones that are end of life as of September 30th. Those are the ones that are most critical, where the attackers could implant their malware and gain persistence on it. Anything with secure boot, it sounds like they were basically not affected by this issue. But Corey, this seems like a pretty serious one.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's obviously one that's similar to our Cyclops Blink, and before that, Fortinet has suffered VPN flaws like that. Pulse Secure now, Ivanti has suffered. So, I mean, we keep on saying it, but state-sponsored threat actors and criminals are targeting remote access in VPN, so very critical. Even WatchGuard recently, internally, through an internal process anyways, found a vulnerability in our own that we fixed well before it became a zero-day being exploited. There's no indication of that, but watch your VPNs, man. I will say I'm surprised that the people watching the video probably watched me going through their announcements, but they're kind of sparse on detail.
I could imagine. Well, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. It's under active exploit, but if they think it's only a single threat actor, maybe it makes sense for them to at least limit the ability from other people to potentially gain the same vulnerability and keep popping devices. So that could be one reason they want to keep some of the details close to the chest. They did at least go pretty in depth into like remediation guidance, though. basically upgrade immediately. They've got a patch out for this, and the new firmware release actually includes a remediation for the persistence mechanism, where if you upgrade to a fixed release, it'll remove that persistence mechanism, which is good. If you can't do that, they've got temporary workarounds in there of basically disabling the mobile user VPNs. After upgrade, they recommend you check for a firmware update .log file. If it exists, it means that they found and removed a persistent like malware on the device. In which case, if you, because of that, or if you suspect it was potentially compromised, they say basically treat all of the device configuration as untrusted and rotate anything that might be a secret in it. So pretty standard stuff, but makes sense. And it also, like you said, like VPNs are clearly the target right now because
And it
they're
seems
by nature
firmware
exposed.
too. I mean, thinking about how they made the persistence, these particular threat actors, likely nation state sponsored, they're paying attention to the partitions in the disk of the, where the firmware is stored, and they're learning a lot about all these different vendors' firmwares to figure it out. So I do think secure boot is very important, and at the very least, different options for firmware integrity checks.
Yeah, 100%. So if you are a Cisco ASA customer, the ones that were most affected are all like it looks like the last one's end of support in like a couple of days. And so hopefully you have already planned to migrate to a newer platform. Either way, if you're still on the newer platform, they still recommend you upgrade, even though they haven't found any successful attacks against it. The vulnerabilities are still present. And an attacker could potentially get around some of those like secure boot mechanisms with enough I don't know, persistence. But so like you said, Corey, like this is like Cyclops Blink. Before that, VPN filter. There's the Fortinet, the Avanti ones. Like it seriously feels like every single week there's another one of these popping up.
Yeah, and VPN filter with Cisco too. Maybe some Linksys
It
as
was like
well, which I think Cisco owns. Yeah.
yeah. What's the
Yeah.
solution to this? What, delete all your VPNs and move to like ZTNA instead?
Well, maybe you're being sarcastic, but I was going to go to ZTNA. I mean, I actually they're still going to be used for VPNs. But the key thing is a lot of the VPNs we're talking about, whether they're when they're mobile users, classic VPNs require a network service that's listening. And unlike a office to point to point VPN like branch office VPNs, which have two specific IPs that you can just define so that you can have an access control list that says the only thing that can access this VPN service is something I know. A mobile user VPN, it's usually designed to be exposed to the internet because you never know what IP a remote user is coming from if they're traveling or whatever. So among all the things like ZTNA, honestly, it's the same use case as VPN. So people sometimes don't understand what's the value of zero trust network access. One of the values is not the point I'm really driving at, is the fact that a lot of mobile user VPNs are wide open. Once you allow access, you give all access to internal networks, and that is not least privilege. You should only let employees access certain things. ZTNA tends to fix that by having policy to user to application based access. So it seems to be more granular. But the biggest thing is the way ZTNA is designed with POPs, it's an inside out connection. You have a cloud service that's looking for you to build a connection, but it's not that the device receiving the VPN is not listening to the whole world on this port. Instead, it will open a connection back to the client when authentication is made. So it's a safer way to allow secure remote access without exposing a service. So the key thing is VPN can be safe, but you're always going to be vulnerable to if there's an issue in a vulnerability in the network service that you have to expose. At least with ZTNA, while there might be vulnerabilities somewhere in the software, you're not exposing the network service to the whole world. So it probably is a very good fix for this type of thing.
That does at least beg the question, like that just means you aren't the one necessarily responsible for that remote access security. Now you're placing the trust on your vendor you're working with.
Host. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have POPs, and what if they have some vulnerability in their service? So you are kind of transferring some of the risk, which, by the way, I'm sure there will be issues and probably have been already in some ZTNA products. But the one thing, if it's a vendor supplying a lot of customers, one, these are usually web applications, which means soon as the vendor knows, they patch the world and you don't have to wait for a fix, right? They're going to update their cloud service and probably fix it really quickly without you having to patch a bunch of devices. But you're right, it does transfer some liability to making sure you work with good security vendors that try not to expose these vulnerabilities. Although
Yep.
mistakes are made by any vendor, the question is, do they quickly and transparently fix them?
Agreed. So either way, I don't know about you. Well, I guess you and I have the same strategy, but I cannot wait until we get rid of as many of our mobile user VPNs as possible here at WatchGuard.
Mark will hate me for this, but I'm going to go ahead and mention that FireCloud Internet Access. We already have what's basically a part of a SASE solution with FireCloud Internet Access, which just means cloud-based firewalling without hardware. But we're about to, or if I think we
I
just
think
did
as of yesterday.
release, yeah, we just released private access, which is the ZTNA portion of this. So if you're a FireCloud customer already and you get the total access license, you have a solution for this in our FireCloud private access.
Yep. So moving on to the next story. So Microsoft's threat intelligence team published a pretty interesting research post last week. Well, the first half of it was interesting. The second half was a pitch for their Copilot AI SOC service thing, which is a little annoying.
I didn't know if you picked up on my joking name, Can AI
Yeah,
Detect AI? But I was actually making a play on this phishing story
there
specifically.
you go. Yeah, so ignoring the sales pitch from them, the actual campaign that they investigated was actually pretty interesting. So this all started on August 18th when they found a phishing campaign using compromised small business email accounts to distribute malicious phishing emails designed to steal credentials. The attackers used a technique called self-addressing, where basically the sender and the recipient matches something the attacker controls, and the actual victim is included in the BCC field instead too, to try and get around some like heuristics-based detections. It was designed to look like a just generic file share notification that someone sent you a PDF that was 35 megabytes large, which is a giant PDF. I don't think I've ever seen one that big under normal use.
I don't know.
Actually,
Does
that's
the
not true.
internet security report get big? We have a lot of pictures in that, I
It's a
think.
couple megabytes, but now that I think about it, I've got a few like technical documentation downloads that are probably tens of megabytes, 400, 500 pages. So maybe I'm wrong. But so the file itself, it's called a 23 megabyte PDF 6 pages.svg. So, I mean, first off, the file size is wrong in there, but it's not an actual PDF. It's a scalable vector graphic file, an SVG file, which attackers have been increasingly using because they're not just like a basic picture like you might think. They actually include a lot of support for active content, like JavaScript, for example, which they can embed directly into the file.
I mean,
So when the
scalable vectors are essentially math. It has to be a file you parse because the whole point is it's not drawing a line, it's mathematically building a line that as you scale will continue to be smooth based on math. So it
yep.
makes sense that they're more active files with code in them.
So when you open up this SVG file, it brings you to a web page that prompts you for CAPTCHA for security validation. Microsoft noted that at this point, the backend system had already been taken down, so they couldn't see the final content of the phish, but they suspected it would likely be to steal your credentials.
It
But they
happens a
did,
lot in our report too. By the time we hit top malware, they've taken down the C2 for it.
yep. And there's a chance that that CAPTCHA thing was actually a legitimate Cloudflare CAPTCHA. Attackers often host their phishing sites behind Cloudflare to try and protect it from analysis, to protect it from bots, basically. They might catch it first, but
What
obviously
is
as soon
that
as Cloudflare
phishing
finds
kit you
out,
use that uses Nginx in the background, but
uh,
it automatically sets up Outlook? And I think by default, the way it does that is while it is really redirecting from a man in the middle page, it's actually grabbing the actual login page from Microsoft Cloud or in this case, whatever they're trying to mimic.
Evil
Cloudflare.
Gen X, which quick tangent, funny enough, Microsoft's gotten really good at detecting that usage, where during the authentication redirect, if there's something suspicious with the domain, so meaning someone's using EvilGenX, Microsoft has basically automated the takedown process to like fire off a request for a court-ordered takedown of it.
Good for them.
I
That's
had one of
great.
my demo domains sniped. We've got a partner of ours that I talked to that he's had a couple taken down too. They've gotten really good at it,
I like
at
it.
least for my demo purposes.
We
But
have to do offline demos, I guess.
yeah, tangent over. So when they looked at the SVG code itself, it was pretty interesting. So first off, normally attackers will use like cryptographic obfuscation when they're trying to hide what's going on within a JavaScript file or like an SVG like this. In this case, instead of doing that, they used business related language to mask the malicious activity. So basically, the beginning of the SVG code looked like some legitimate business analytics dashboard. It had elements for including like bar charts and different labels for months, but it was completely invisible to the user. So it was if a machine looked at it, they might see that, or if someone manually analyzed the SVG, they might see it. But when you open it to display it, none of this actually shows up. The payload functionality was hidden using business terms like revenue or operations or risk or shares that were stored in an array called data analytics or a field called data analytics. And they actually, the JavaScript that builds the fish actually encoded its payload using those words mapped to like sequences of letters or specific characters to like build out the instruction set. So interesting form of
Smart.
obfuscation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everyone that works in corporate America thinks of like leaders or executives or analysts talking about Q over Q, Y over Y, capital revenue gain, and they just tune out and don't care. So it's a really smart way to hide something that's actually
I mean, it
building
makes sense.
bad.
Like, if I open up a JavaScript file, for example, that I suspect is malicious, and I immediately see just like gibberish, like variables that are like building out function names using variables like that, like it's clear there's some obfuscation going on, which usually means it's probably malicious. Could be
Bad.
someone protecting
Yeah.
their stuff, but usually bad. If I open it up and just at a quick glance, I just saw a bunch of crap about EBITDA or something, like I would be less
Synergies. They should use
exactly.
synergies.
I would less likely immediately think it was malicious. I mean, now I would, but
Oh yeah,
it's just
yeah.
it's different. I understand why they did it, and it's kind of an interesting quirk still.
It's smart in a bad way.
But yeah, exactly. But like the main takeaway from this is like attackers are using a whole bunch of different types of attachments now to try and carry out their phishing campaigns. Like this is basically a website embedded in a picture file, an SVG file. We still see LNKs being used like a shortcut to launch PowerShell with an encoded command. They're getting crafty because they can't just deliver like malware.exe to your inbox. It's got to be
Just
something
a
else.
reminder, I think we said many times, and we usually use documents. Like I usually say, even my grandpa or uncle or aunt knows not to open an executable file, but they think a Word document is a document, or a even a GIF, or a something that's legitimately a picture has been shown to have ways to take the parser it's in and exploit a vulnerability. So we have to remember that these files aren't just SVG is not just a picture, it's a potential avenue for malware if there's a vulnerability somewhere, or in this case, just because it can run JavaScript.
Yep. So Microsoft's point of this post was to pitch their Copilot powered XDR platform, since that's what they claim caught this one. But still a really interesting phishing campaign, and a good example of how attackers are leveraging these different file types to try and kick off those attacks.
Naughty,
So
naughty.
naughty, naughty. The last story I want to talk about is a follow up to like a topic we've been discussing for the last month or so. If you remember last week, we talked about the Shai-Hulud NPM worm that was self-propagating its way through popular JavaScript node
I
packages.
always thought I would want to ride a Shai-Hulud, but I don't want to ride that Shai-Hulud worm.
No, doesn't sound fun. Well, I don't know. I would be scared to death of riding the actual worm, but I could hang with some malware.
Do it for the cred, and your eyes will turn cool blue after having enough
There we go.
spice.
Yep. So either way, like
By
one
the
of
way,
our
all the non-nerds are like, "What the heck are these guys talking about?" They're like,
Dune reference. Uh, so if you remember, we ended that episode with basically a like, what the heck do we even do for this?
"Yeah,
Like, there's
there's
so
so
many
many of
different
these."
supply chain attacks going on. Like, what could possibly be done?
And
Uh,
specifically to NPM.
exactly. The good news is GitHub's like director of open source security is clearly a listener of our podcast because very soon after that they published a blog post describing what they're going to do about it. So in their post that they published last week, they went through their plans for how they plan to improve software supply chain security in response to these attacks that we had, the series of ones in the last month. They talked about the actions they took specifically during that Shai Hulud attack, where they removed 500 compromised packages from the NPM registry. They also blocked package
By
uploads
the way,
containing the
that's
malware.
up from, I think when we talked about it, it was 187.
Yeah.
So just hearing the 500 shows that it eventually grew even bigger. But sorry to
Yep.
keep going.
They
I'm
also
gonna let you
mentioned
finish.
they blocked, no, you're not, blocked package uploads containing the malware IOCs to stop that self-replication. So basically killed it dead right there. But that was just for that one incident. They also went over some of their more longer term plans that's going to take some time to roll out because they are disruptive even for normal developers. But what they think will help prevent this type of attack going forward. So first off, when you publish a package to the node package index or any other package manager, you generally either do it through like a CI/CD pipeline, so using your build tools, or you can just do it locally from your own machine. One of the changes they're doing is if you're going to publish a package locally from your machine using your own user account, they will mandate multi-factor authentication. So at least making it a little bit more difficult to use a stolen token or a stolen credential or a compromised machine to publish it without also getting that
I would
MFA
say a
function.
lot more difficult. It at least doubles the work by attackers. I mean,
Yep.
we know that 2FA is not perfect, but it's good.
Yep. The second one is so GitHub supports a couple different kinds of API tokens. They've got their classic API tokens, which are actually in the process of removing now or deprecating. They also have granular access tokens, where you can give very specific permissions on very specific repositories to one of these API tokens. If they're going to be, so one of their changes is for these granular access tokens, if they're usable for publishing a package, they'll have a maximum lifetime of 7 days. So that way, if one of them gets compromised, at least like the blast window is a little bit lower. This one will actually end up being pretty disruptive, I suspect. Like even for us, we'll have to update quite a few of our tools that the security operations team at WatchGuard uses.
If
Um,
people don't have like formal PKI structure to manage sharing the secrets and tokens, it's definitely
yep,
something that they'll probably need now. I mean, a lot of people that are doing modern processes in GitHub are publishing things for cloud apps, and they want to automate, chains of development and compiling and building packages. So that means they should also have some automation around generating tokens regularly to make so
yep.
yeah, it's a good security move. It is unfortunately sometimes good security does add disruption if you don't have new ways to automate it.
Yep. And then the third one is focusing on a new way of publishing or a new way of authenticating publish requests called trusted publishers, which was originally created by the Python package index in 2023, later adopted by Ruby Gems and crates.io, and just a couple months ago, the Node package index. And it
By the way,
basically
PyPy
uses,
was another repository that had a lot of
yes,
digital supply chain issues, so it makes sense that Python folks would be thinking about this.
and it's basically the goal of it is to try and get API tokens out of build pipelines. So instead of having a API token, even one of these granular tokens where it might be valid for like days, weeks, or even months in there, they want it to be a one-time use, authenticate, and when you go to actually publish the package instead. And so to do that, it uses OpenID Connect, the same way you might integrate like your GitHub account with other services. you can now set up a build pipeline to get a one-time token. So authenticate itself as using a third-party or GitHub-hosted identity provider, get that one-time token to go publish it. That way, if that process gets compromised, they can't steal a token and then use it for additional publishing down the line. So they've been slowly like adding support for this. Like I said, NPM now has support, and GitHub is going to push to make this the default for programmatic publishing of packages going forward. I think this is a good change. It's a very new service, like only got created 2 years ago, which in the world of technology is like a newborn.
It's
But
nascent.
it seems like a good idea to make it a little more difficult to basically take a stolen authentication token and use it however you want.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love they're doing it, and I love. I mean, GitHub's a good place to start all this, since that's where a lot of development starts in these times.
Yep.
And we know that digital supply chain attacks are a thing.
Yeah. A few other things I mentioned that they plan to do. They're going to deprecate those legacy classic tokens, the ones that aren't granular. They're going to deprecate one-time password-based MFA, so those rolling like 6-digit codes, and instead migrate users to FIDO-based multi-factor. They're going to limit granular tokens with publishing permissions to even shorter time expirations. They'll disallow tokens by default for publishing and instead encourage developers to publish using trusted publishers or 2FA enforced local publishing. They're going to remove the option to bypass multi-factor authentication for local publishing. Basically, you have to, period, no matter what. No way for your own local admin to override it. And they will add more identity providers for trusted publishing verification too. So all these are like on their own good things, but they are going to be disruptive for normal use, which is why they're not just immediately flicking the switch right now, and why they'll have a metered rollout for this over time. I think this will have a pretty meaningful impact. It's not going to totally solve the problem. Like token theft is still a thing. I'm sure there will be weaknesses folks can still exploit to try and weaponize a compromised GitHub account or NPM account. But
it raises the bar
something.
Significantly. Yeah. I think a token theft usually means that somebody has to have pretty weak security, and you have to. It should be hard to do token theft if you're an organization that really secures them. So, I agree with you. I think this is a great change. I hope developers are paying attention so that they can change their build processes to go with this. I'm sure GitHub is probably sending out all kinds of email warnings over time talking about how things will change, but I think it's a good thing for sure.
It definitely makes it more difficult. It doesn't prevent everything. Like if the attacker gained access to your GitHub account, they could abuse your existing GitHub actions, which in theory could authenticate using the trusted publisher system and still publish something. But it does prevent them from taking secrets they steal from you and setting up their own development pipeline and publishing pipeline, because they would not be able to pass an OpenID Connect authentication. So yeah, overall good. I want to see what the timeline is for this one. I feel like this is like a, end of next year, we'll start to see some of this really start to manifest. But I mean, we just had 3 major NPM incidents in the last month, so maybe that will push them to have a more aggressive timeline to get this across.
It'd probably be quick. When we realized we needed DNSSEC instead of just DNS, the whole industry acted to move that really quickly, right?
Yep, exactly. Great point. So
IPv6, that went so fast.
As Corey is suggesting, none of this matters. We're all screwed no matter what.
No, I'm kidding. I bet you they'll move faster than DNSSEC did.
I think so. And in this case, it is like basically a monopoly being able to enforce these changes versus DNSSEC, where everyone on the internet can do whatever the heck they want.
ICANN, and you have this political global body.
Yep. So I don't know about you, Corey, but I'm feeling a little bit better right now than I was 1 week ago after discussing that story.
Yay. Maybe you can take some Tylenol too. That'll help.
There it is. Oh, man. Either way, like good changes. This is actually an optimistic end to the episode. That's good. Let's just wait until next week until everything comes crashing down again.
I can keep my Lego "This is fine fire" thing in the background all blurry instead of bringing it out to you.
Perfect. That
So
sounds great.
this is fine fire, dog. I need a
I
dumpster
haven't,
fire version.
I haven't seen that set. I'll have to go find it.
It might not be official Lego.
Ooh, Corey with them bootleg plastic pieces.
Yeah. Go TikTok shop.
Never mind. I can go without it. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can find Corey on TikTok, apparently. You can also find both of us on Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me, Corey's at SecAdept, and we're both at watchguard_technologies on Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.
Next week, we should hear from them.